The morning sun filtered softly through the lace curtains of Eleanor Carter's cozy living room, casting delicate shadows over the worn wooden floor. A crisp breeze from the early autumn air rustled the leaves outside, carrying with it a faint scent of fallen chestnuts. Eleanor, a petite woman of 72 with silver-streaked chestnut hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, adjusted her glasses and settled into her favorite armchair. Her sharp blue eyes, still keen despite the years, scanned the bank statement she had laid out on the coffee table. Eleanor's hands bore the gentle tremor of age, yet they moved deliberately, methodically, as she scrutinized each number. For decades, she had managed her finances with meticulous care. Her late husband, Robert, had always admired her prudence and trusted judgment, often teasing that she could balance a checkbook blindfolded. Eleanor's mind, however, was clouded with unease today. There were discrepancies she could no longer ignore. Large sums that she didn't recall authorizing had been withdrawn from her accounts. Small, seemingly insignificant purchases added up, but the timing, late at night, often when she was asleep, felt deliberate, intrusive. Madison Carter, her 45-year-old daughter, was nothing like Eleanor in appearance. Madison was tall and athletic, with honey blonde hair that fell in effortless waves around her angular face. Her eyes, a piercing green, always seemed to hold a question or judgment. Her charm was magnetic. People often found themselves wanting to please her, though Eleanor sometimes sensed an underlying calculation in those smiles. Madison's husband, Ryan, 48, was of medium height but broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair streaked with gray, a neatly trimmed beard, and a habit of folding his hands tightly when he was anxious or defensive. Both Madison and Ryan had always presented themselves as responsible adults, yet Eleanor's intuition whispered that something was amiss. The first alert came subtly. Eleanor had noticed that her credit card statements arrived with more frequency than usual. Initially, she attributed it to modern banking protocols or a clerical error. But as the months passed, she began recognizing patterns. Transactions at stores she had never visited, withdrawals at odd hours, and an accumulation of charges that didn't correspond with any of her routine spending. At first, she had hesitated to confront her daughter and son-in-law, hoping that the discrepancies were simple misunderstandings or accounting errors. But now, a gnawing suspicion settled deep in her chest, growing with every passing day. Eleanor's eyes lingered on a particular entry. $2,200 at a boutique in downtown Elmwood, a purchase she hadn't authorized. Her heart tightened as memories of Madison's pleas for emergency funds over the last 2 years flashed through her mind. There had been hospital bills, car repairs, and even instances where Madison had insisted she borrow the credit card for social events, promising to reimburse the amounts immediately. Eleanor remembered the gentle insistence in her daughter's voice, always laced with urgency, always tinged with a subtle pressure that made saying no feel unthinkable. Eleanor set the statement aside and reached for a notebook, opening it to the page she had reserved for financial tracking. She began writing down each transaction, the date, the amount, and the location. The act was methodical, almost ritualistic, grounding her amidst the storm of suspicion and doubt. As she wrote, she recalled the words of her old friend Alma, who had often reminded her, "Trust your instincts, Eleanor. A mother's intuition never lies." The thought that her own family might be misusing her trust was unbearable. Eleanor had raised Madison with love, patience, and sacrifice. She had supported her through college, through job changes, through heartbreaks. She had hoped that Madison's values, molded in part by Eleanor's guidance, would reflect gratitude and responsibility. Yet now, Eleanor wondered if she had been too trusting, too lenient, too willing to prioritize familial harmony over vigilance. A soft knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Eleanor's aging cat, Whiskers, a gray tabby with sharp amber eyes and a gentle purr, brushed against her legs, sensing her unease. Whiskers had been a comforting presence through the lonely days following Robert's death, always alert, always calm. Eleanor reached down to stroke his fur, drawing some solace from his steady warmth. "Mom, it's just me," Madison called cheerfully from the doorway, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. She wore a tailored cream blouse and dark jeans, her appearance polished, exuding effortless confidence. Eleanor's chest tightened. The encounter she had been dreading for weeks had arrived, yet she was determined to face it with clarity. "Madison," Eleanor began, her voice measured, "I need to talk about the bank statements." Madison's smile faltered slightly, though her green eyes retained their characteristic spark. "Is everything okay, Mom?" she asked, tilting her head, a subtle sign Eleanor had learned to read. This tilt meant Madison was assessing the situation, calculating her response. Eleanor gestured to the papers on the table. "There are several transactions I don't remember authorizing. Some were quite large, and the timing is questionable." Madison's expression hardened imperceptibly. "Mom, those were all for emergencies. You know we would never misuse your trust." Eleanor studied her daughter's face, reading the practiced ease of Madison's posture, the gentle firmness of her words, the insistence hidden beneath a veneer of concern. "I want to understand every withdrawal, every purchase. I need transparency, Madison, not excuses." Ryan, who had been standing quietly near the hallway, finally spoke. His voice was low, controlled, with a subtle edge of defensiveness. "Mom, you're making this into something it isn't. It's money, not a moral issue." His dark eyes met Eleanor's, searching for a sign of hesitation. "It is a moral issue, Ryan," Eleanor replied firmly. "It is about respect and honesty, and it is about my money, which I have earned and managed responsibly all my life." The room was tense. Eleanor could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing against the walls. Madison shifted slightly, her hand brushing against a stack of mail, a gesture Eleanor noticed as a hint of impatience. Eleanor's heart ached at the thought of confronting her family in this way. Yet she knew she had no choice. Her independence, her dignity, and her financial security were at stake. "I am going to review every transaction," Eleanor said quietly but firmly, "and I will be keeping meticulous records from now on. I want copies of receipts, explanations for every withdrawal, and a full accounting of what you've used my card for in the past 6 months." Madison's lips pressed into a thin line. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Mom, this is obsessive," Ryan said finally. "We've been honest with you. We've been responsible." Eleanor shook her head. "I have no reason to believe that anymore. Trust is earned, not assumed. And until I see that transparency, I will protect my money." For a moment, silence filled the room. Whiskers jumped onto Eleanor's lap, curling up as if sensing her resolve. Madison and Ryan exchanged a glance, one Eleanor couldn't decipher fully, though it carried an unmistakable undercurrent of calculation. "I'll get you the receipts," Madison said finally, her tone cautious. "We just want to make this right." Eleanor nodded, a mixture of relief and lingering suspicion swirling inside her. She knew that the path ahead would not be easy. She would have to navigate the delicate line between family loyalty and self-preservation, between love and caution. As Madison and Ryan left the house, Eleanor returned to her armchair. Whiskers nestled on her lap. She stared at the statements and the notebook filled with meticulous notes. Her mind raced, but beneath the anxiety lay a steely determination. She would uncover the truth. She would safeguard her finances, and she would protect herself, no matter the cost. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, bathing the living room in a warm golden light. Eleanor felt a strange sense of calm amid the storm of suspicion and fear. This was only the beginning, she realized. The truth, once revealed, could change everything, and she was ready to face it. A chilly wind swept through the narrow streets of Elmwood that Thursday morning, rattling the half-opened windows of Eleanor Carter's home. Golden leaves tumbled along the sidewalk, echoing the unease growing in Eleanor's heart. She sat at her kitchen table, a steaming cup of chamomile tea in her hands, her sharp blue eyes fixed on the latest bank statement. Eleanor's petite frame, slightly hunched from age yet resolute, seemed smaller against the mountain of papers before her. The numbers glared back at her, each unauthorized withdrawal and late-night transaction gnawing at her calm. Her mind replayed the events of the past weeks. Suspicion had grown into certainty. Madison and Ryan were accessing her accounts at odd hours, sometimes even when she was asleep. She thought of the $950 withdrawal from an upscale boutique at 11:47 p.m. last Friday, the $200 charge at a gourmet market in the middle of the night, and the repeated overdraft fees she had incurred unknowingly. These were not simple oversights. They were deliberate incursions into her autonomy, and Eleanor felt a strange mix of betrayal and anger. Determined to confront them, Eleanor straightened her shoulders and prepared herself. Whiskers, her loyal 8-year-old gray tabby, leapt onto the table, curling around her wrist as if sensing her tension. The cat's steady purring offered some comfort. Eleanor traced his soft fur with her fingers, drawing courage from the familiar presence. The doorbell rang sharply. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. She opened the door to find Madison standing there, her honey-blonde hair gleaming in the weak autumn sunlight, green eyes wide with a practiced charm. She wore a pale pink cardigan and tailored black trousers, exuding confidence, though Eleanor could detect a flicker of unease beneath the surface. Behind her, Ryan lingered in the shadow of the doorway, his dark brown hair streaked with silver, broad shoulders stiff with tension, his neatly trimmed beard highlighting the frown lines that had deepened over the past months. "Good morning, Mom," Madison began, her voice light but edged with something Eleanor could not immediately place, a subtle calculation. "We just wanted to check in." Eleanor gestured for them to sit at the kitchen table. "We need to talk about my accounts," she said firmly, trying to steady her voice against the tremor of anger. Madison smiled, placing her hands delicately on the table. "Mom, is this about those charges? It's all necessary, you know. Everything we've done is for the family." Eleanor's blue eyes sharpened. "Necessary?" "Madison, $200 at a boutique in the middle of the night is not necessary. Late-night withdrawals without my knowledge are not necessary. These are my accounts, my money, and I will not tolerate unauthorized use." Ryan stepped forward, his broad frame leaning slightly over the table. "Mom, please. You're blowing this out of proportion. We've always been honest with you. We've made sacrifices too." Eleanor's gaze held him steady. "Sacrifices? Taking money without my consent? Manipulating my trust? That is not a sacrifice, Ryan. That is a violation." Madison's eyes flickered to Ryan as if searching for a signal. Then she spoke, her tone soft but firm. "Mom, we only did this because you were so generous. You've always been willing to help. We thought you would understand." Eleanor felt a pang of hurt, the kind that twists deep in a mother's chest. She remembered raising Madison with care, teaching her to value honesty and integrity. Understand? I understand generosity. I do not understand theft from my own household. I do not understand deception by my daughter and son-in-law. Ryan's jaw tightened, the lines around his mouth deepening as he struggled to maintain composure. Mom, if you can't trust us, maybe it's better if we don't interfere. Maybe we should just keep our distance until you figure this out. The threat, subtle yet palpable, hung in the air. It was a dangerous test of Eleanor's resolve, and she recognized it instantly. She drew a slow breath and met his gaze. Distance, she said firmly, is exactly what I am considering. Distance from the misuse of my trust. Distance from anyone who does not respect my autonomy. You will no longer have access to my accounts, my cards, or any financial instruments without my explicit permission. Madison's delicate fingers tapped the table, her green eyes narrowing imperceptibly. Mom, are you saying you don't trust us? I am saying that trust must be earned, Eleanor replied, her voice unwavering. And at the moment, your actions have not earned it. I love you both, but love does not excuse deception or theft. From now on, I am controlling my own finances. The room fell silent, except for Whisker's soft purring, which seemed louder in the tension-filled space. Eleanor noticed the subtle shifts in posture. Madison leaning back slightly, her smile faltering, Ryan's fists pressing against the table's edge, the careful balancing act of their composure cracking. We thought this was the right way to manage things, Madison said finally, her voice quieter, tinged with frustration. You've always been so generous, Mom. We never wanted to hurt you. You have hurt me, Eleanor said softly but firmly, repeatedly, and it's not just about money. It's about respect, honesty, and trust, all of which have been compromised. Ryan ran a hand through his thick, dark hair, sighing. Mom, we didn't think you'd react like this. We were trying to make life easier for everyone. By undermining me? Eleanor asked, her blue eyes glinting. By creating secret withdrawals and opening accounts without my knowledge? This is not life made easier. This is manipulation. Madison's lips pressed into a thin line. Eleanor could sense the calculations behind her green eyes, the effort to frame their actions as justified, to avoid blame, to maintain control. But Eleanor was no longer willing to let charm mask deception. I want all my cards returned immediately, Eleanor demanded, her hands resting firmly on the table. I want full access to my accounts, and until I am certain that no unauthorized transactions will occur, you will not handle my finances in any way. Madison's fingers hesitated over the cards on the table. Ryan shifted uneasily, his dark eyes avoiding Eleanor's piercing gaze. Mom, if you do this, if you cut us off completely, Ryan began, his voice trailing into a threatening edge. Then you must understand there will be consequences. We will keep our distance, yes, but you may find that this relationship changes. Eleanor's chest tightened, a mixture of sorrow and resolve coursing through her. She had always believed in the strength of family, the bonds of trust, and the power of love. But today, she realized that love without respect and honesty was fragile, easily broken. Then let it change, she said, her voice steady. I will not allow my life, my home, and my money to be dictated by manipulation or fear. I am 72 years old. I am capable. I am aware, and I will protect what I have earned. Madison's hand hovered over the stack of cards, her green eyes shimmering with a mixture of anger, hurt, and calculation. After a tense pause, she withdrew, gathering the cards with careful fingers. Ryan followed silently, both of them standing for a moment in the doorway, the air thick with unspoken words. Without another word, they left. Eleanor closed the door, leaning against it for support, her heart still racing. Whiskers rubbed against her legs, and she bent down to stroke him, drawing strength from his quiet presence. Eleanor felt a wave of both relief and sorrow. The confrontation had happened, the first step toward reclaiming her autonomy taken, but the rift in her family had begun. Sitting back in her armchair, Eleanor gazed at the crisp autumn sky through the window, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The numbers, the withdrawals, the calculated explanations, they were no longer just figures on a page. They were symbols of a betrayal that cut deep, testing her patience, resilience, and love. As the wind rattled the window panes and the leaves danced along the streets, Eleanor made a silent vow to herself. She would regain control. She would document everything, track every transaction, and protect her financial independence. And while the path ahead would be difficult, she felt a newfound clarity. The confrontation had illuminated the truth, and for the first time in months, she felt a spark of empowerment amid the lingering ache of disappointment. This was only the beginning. The family she had trusted had crossed a line, and Eleanor was ready to face whatever came next, armed with vigilance, resolve, and the quiet strength that had carried her through 7 decades. Rain pelted against the windows of Eleanor Carter's Elmwood home, painting streaks across the glass like tears tracing down her cheeks. The gray clouds mirrored the storm brewing in her mind. Eleanor, petite yet resilient, sat at her oak desk, the morning light dim and filtered by heavy curtains. Her silver-streaked chestnut hair fell loosely around her shoulders, framing a face etched with both wisdom and recent worries. Whiskers, her sleek gray tabby, curled in a sunbeam that barely penetrated the gloom, his eyes half closed, yet alert. The previous confrontation with Madison and Ryan still lingered in her chest like a bruise. Eleanor knew that they had crossed a line, but she needed proof, concrete evidence of the deception that had invaded her life. Her hands shook slightly as she opened the folder she had kept since the encounter, filled with receipts, bank statements, and notes she had meticulously recorded over the last month. Her pulse quickened when she saw it. Among the papers lay several copies of her credit card, tucked carefully into a small envelope. She hadn't noticed them before. "They've been doing this in secret," Eleanor whispered to Whiskers, her voice trembling. "Multiple copies, all to use when I wasn't looking." She traced the edges of the cards with her fingers, each embossed number a testament to betrayal. Her heart ached. How could her own daughter and son-in-law exploit her trust so blatantly? A mixture of anger, sadness, and determination coursed through her veins, anchoring her resolve. Eleanor decided she needed professional guidance. She picked up the phone and dialed the number she had saved for Benjamin Clark, a respected attorney specializing in elder financial abuse. When the line connected, a firm yet compassionate voice answered. "Mrs. Carter? Benjamin Clark speaking?" he said. Clark was a tall man in his late 50s, with a salt and pepper beard neatly trimmed and sharp hazel eyes that seemed to pierce through pretense. His demeanor exuded calm authority, and the slight furrow between his brows suggested a man deeply committed to justice. He had earned a reputation for tenacity in cases of financial exploitation among the elderly, having once defended a widow whose life savings had been siphoned by a trusted caregiver. "Mr. Clark, I need your help. I've discovered multiple unauthorized transactions on my accounts and, worse, copies of my credit card in the possession of my daughter and son-in-law," Eleanor explained, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Clark's tone softened slightly, conveying both understanding and determination. "Mrs. Carter, what you're describing is serious. We need to document everything meticulously. Every unauthorized transaction, every copy of your cards, every suspicious withdrawal. This will form the foundation of our case." Over the next several hours, Eleanor worked methodically with Clark. She combed through months of statements, highlighting charges that did not align with her lifestyle. $1,500 at a boutique in Midtown, late-night grocery purchases far exceeding her usual expenditures, and ATM withdrawals that had never been discussed. As she listed each item, the figure began to crystallize, a staggering total exceeding $30,000. Her chest tightened, the enormity of the betrayal pressing down on her frail frame. "It's worse than I imagined," Eleanor muttered. Her mind raced with questions. How could they justify these amounts? How could Madison, the daughter she had nurtured, and Ryan, the man she had welcomed into her home, orchestrate such systematic deception? Her thoughts spiraled between grief and anger, yet determination surfaced stronger than ever. She would not be a passive victim. Benjamin Clark arrived at her home that afternoon. He was taller in person than Eleanor had anticipated, his broad shoulders and commanding presence radiating both authority and reassurance. Dressed in a charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt, he carried a briefcase filled with documents, a laptop, and a portable scanner. His expression was professional, yet empathetic. "Mrs. Carter, I've reviewed the documents you sent over," Clark said, setting his briefcase on the desk and removing a tablet. "This is a clear pattern of financial abuse. These card copies, combined with the unauthorized transactions, are irrefutable evidence of exploitation." Eleanor felt a surge of relief tempered by lingering sorrow. "But what can be done? They're my daughter and son-in-law. They could claim I authorized it." Clark leaned forward, resting his forearms on his briefcase. "Authorization requires consent, Mrs. Carter. You never signed any documents granting them permission to duplicate your cards or access additional funds. We have proof of their unauthorized use, and with careful documentation, we can pursue both civil recovery and, if necessary, criminal charges." As they spoke, Eleanor's mind raced with memories of trust violated, moments she had assumed were innocent gestures now reframed as calculated manipulations. She realized that each favor, the loans they never repaid, the trips they claimed were urgent, had been a test of her tolerance, a step toward absolute control over her resources. She shivered, the gravity of the situation settling like ice in her veins. Together, they began compiling evidence. Eleanor carefully cataloged each transaction with corresponding receipts, timestamps, and descriptions of the purchases. Clark instructed her on photographing the copied cards, storing them securely, and cross-referencing dates with her own whereabouts. The process was exhaustive, emotionally taxing, yet Eleanor felt empowerment with each item documented. She was reclaiming control, a small but significant victory against those who had sought to undermine her autonomy. In the midst of the work, Clark introduced Eleanor to an IT specialist, Jason Lee. Jason was a young man in his late 20s with short black hair, warm brown eyes, and an easygoing demeanor that belied his expertise in cyber forensics. His presence seemed to lighten the heavy atmosphere in the room. "Mrs. Carter, we'll trace all online transactions back to the devices used," he explained. "We can pinpoint when and where the cards were used, even if they were processed online or through mobile payments." Over the following days, Jason's work revealed a troubling pattern. Madison had used one copy of Eleanor's card to make multiple purchases late at night, while Ryan had used another to withdraw cash from ATMs in distant neighborhoods. Each use was meticulously recorded, complete with timestamps, locations, and transaction details. Eleanor felt a mix of vindication and heartbreak. The evidence she feared existed was indeed real. Mrs. Carter, this is all going to court, Clark said firmly, reviewing the findings. With this documentation, we can not only halt their access, but also pursue recovery of all funds taken. Eleanor nodded, a firm resolve settling into her chest. I will not let them take more from me. I will protect my home, my savings, and my dignity. The next morning, Eleanor called Madison and Ryan. Her voice was calm, measured, but carried an unmistakable firmness. The cards are to be returned immediately. Any further use will be considered fraud, and I will pursue legal action. This is your only warning. Madison's voice faltered. Mom, we didn't think. I don't want excuses, Eleanor interrupted, her tone unwavering. I want action. Your actions have consequences. Do not contact me directly again. Ryan, usually the stoic counterpart, was uncharacteristically silent. Eleanor could sense the tension on the other end of the line, the first cracks in the facade of control they had maintained. After hanging up, Eleanor sank into her armchair, Whiskers jumping onto her lap, nuzzling her hand. For the first time in weeks, a sense of calm washed over her. She had uncovered the truth, documented every transgression, and prepared a plan for action. The path ahead would be arduous, fraught with legal challenges and emotional turmoil. But Eleanor felt a flicker of hope. She was no longer a passive participant in the exploitation of her life. She had become an active defender of her rights. That evening, Eleanor sat by the window, listening to the rhythmic patter of rain. Her reflection in the glass showed lines of worry, determination, and resolve. She whispered to herself, I will not be silenced. I will not be diminished. I will reclaim what is mine. Whiskers purred, a small but comforting presence in the quiet storm. The chapter closed with Eleanor's newfound clarity and readiness to face Madison and Ryan with legal force. She knew the confrontation ahead would test her limits, but with Benjamin Clark and Jason Lee by her side, she felt armed with knowledge, evidence, and an unshakable resolve to reclaim her life and financial independence. A crisp autumn wind swept through the small town of Elmwood, rustling the amber leaves along Eleanor Carter's front walkway. The sun barely peeked through the dense clouds, casting a muted glow over her home. Inside, Eleanor, petite but resolute, moved with careful precision, arranging folders and documents on her mahogany dining table. Her silver-streaked chestnut hair framed a face etched with both age and resilience, her green eyes gleaming with renewed determination. Whiskers, the sleek gray tabby, padded quietly across the hardwood floor, his tail swishing as he observed the flurry of activity with mild curiosity. Benjamin Clark, the seasoned attorney with salt and pepper hair and sharp hazel eyes, arrived promptly, carrying a leather briefcase stuffed with legal files. He exuded calm authority, a mix of experience and empathy that instantly reassured Eleanor. Dressed in a charcoal suit and polished brown shoes, he radiated both professionalism and a genuine concern for her well-being. Mrs. Carter, today we begin the formal collection of evidence, he said, laying out a structured plan. Their first task was to gather security camera footage from multiple stores where Madison and Ryan had used Eleanor's card. Clark made the calls, and within hours, the files began arriving digitally. Eleanor studied the clips with a growing sense of betrayal. Madison, a slender woman in her early 40s with sandy blonde hair and pale skin, moved through boutiques and cafes with an ease that now seemed rehearsed, her smiles directed at cashiers masking the deceit. Ryan, tall and broad-shouldered with a square jaw and piercing blue eyes, appeared in ATMs and retail stores with a casual demeanor, but Eleanor noticed the calculated precision in his movements. Both were her family, yet here they were exploiting her trust systematically. We need a chronological map of every transaction, Clark explained. Every purchase, withdrawal, and card use will be documented, with timestamps and locations. This will show a clear pattern of abuse. Eleanor worked late into the night, meticulously noting dates, times, amounts, and locations of each suspicious activity. The process was exhausting, but it became a strange solace. With each record, she felt her autonomy returning, each line on her spreadsheet a step toward reclaiming her life. The enormity of the task pressed upon her, but she welcomed it. She was no longer passive. She was actively defending herself. Clark emphasized the importance of corroborating the financial evidence with medical testimony. He arranged a meeting with Dr. Lillian Monroe, Eleanor's primary physician for over 15 years. Dr. Monroe, a poised woman in her mid-50s with shoulder-length auburn hair and a warm, analytical gaze, conducted a thorough assessment. Her reputation for integrity and meticulous attention to detail preceded her. She had served as an expert witness in several elder care cases. "Eleanor," Dr. Monroe said during the examination, her voice calm but firm, "your cognitive functions are completely intact. Your memory, judgment, and reasoning are within normal limits for your age. There is no sign of dementia or any condition that would impair your decision-making." Relief washed over Eleanor. The words reinforced her belief that she had acted appropriately to protect her finances. Dr. Monroe agreed to provide a detailed affidavit to be used in court, affirming Eleanor's full mental capacity. Next, Clark introduced Eleanor to Vanessa Torres, a forensic accountant specializing in financial fraud. Vanessa, a sharp-minded woman in her early 30s, with long, dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, olive-toned skin, and bright hazel eyes, carried a laptop brimming with analytical software. Her presence was calm yet assertive, and Eleanor immediately trusted her expertise. "Mrs. Carter, we'll trace every dollar, map patterns of use, and identify any fraudulent accounts," Vanessa explained. "Even hidden credit cards or unauthorized online accounts can be uncovered." Using banking data, credit reports, and online transaction logs, Vanessa exposed additional layers of deception. Eleanor was shocked to learn that Madison and Ryan had opened at least 2 more fraudulent credit accounts in her name, amassing over $12,000 in unauthorized debt. Each account had been applied for online, using her personal information without consent. The discovery was infuriating, but also galvanizing. She was seeing the full scope of the scheme for the first time. Over the next week, Eleanor, Clark, and Vanessa worked tirelessly to assemble the case. The security footage, bank statements, and forensic accounting reports were cross-referenced with her personal calendar, phone records, and witness statements. Each piece reinforced the narrative of systematic exploitation. Clark reminded Eleanor, "This isn't just about money, it's about proving intent and pattern. The more thorough we are, the stronger your case will be in court." Amid the legal preparations, Eleanor found herself reflecting on her emotional journey. The betrayal by Madison and Ryan cut deeply. Every lunch invitation, every family celebration had been shadowed by manipulation. Yet through the meticulous preparation, Eleanor felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't experienced in years. The process gave her a renewed sense of control and purpose. One afternoon, as rain drizzled outside, Clark and Vanessa gathered around the table with Eleanor. Vanessa displayed a timeline of every transaction, color-coded to indicate unauthorized card use, cash withdrawals, and fraudulent credit applications. "See here?" Vanessa pointed to the late-night purchases and the sequence of ATM withdrawals. "It's all systematic. They targeted nights when you were home, likely expecting you to be unaware. The pattern is consistent across multiple accounts and locations." Eleanor's chest tightened as she studied the data. The visual representation left no room for doubt. The abuse was calculated and ongoing. She felt a mixture of anger and resolve. "They thought I wouldn't notice," she murmured. But I see everything now. Clark placed a reassuring hand over hers. And soon, the court will see it too. With these documents, we can challenge every claim they make. Your evidence is overwhelming, and the law is on your side. The next phase involved preparing for potential confrontations. Clark discussed strategies for depositions and court testimony, coaching Eleanor on how to remain calm and composed under pressure. They rehearsed scenarios where Madison and Ryan might attempt to undermine her credibility, teaching Eleanor to respond with facts, documentation, and measured clarity. Late that evening, Eleanor sat by her window, rain tapping against the glass. Whiskers curled in her lap, his steady purring a comfort against the storm outside and within. Eleanor's thoughts drifted to the challenges ahead. Courtroom battles, possible counterclaims, and the strain of confronting family. Yet, beneath the anxiety, a quiet strength persisted. She had uncovered the truth, documented the abuse, and assembled a team of skilled professionals to support her. Her reflection in the window revealed a woman transformed. Where fear and doubt had once resided, there was now determination, clarity, and resolve. Eleanor whispered to herself, "I will not be taken advantage of. I will protect myself and my home. This ends on my terms." The chapter concluded with Eleanor and her team fully prepared to pursue legal action, armed with incontrovertible evidence, expert testimony, and the courage to confront those who had betrayed her. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in months, Eleanor felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that justice, not deceit, would ultimately prevail. A gray, drizzling morning settled over Elmwood, the courthouse looming under the somber sky as Eleanor Carter arrived with Benjamin Clark by her side. Her gait was measured yet firm. At 72, her slight frame and delicate hands betrayed nothing of the resolve simmering within. Silver-streaked chestnut hair framed her face, green eyes alert and determined, her mind sharp despite the passage of years. Whiskers, the gray tabby, had stayed behind at home, but his absence only sharpened Eleanor's focus, allowing her to channel all her energy toward the legal battle ahead. The courtroom was a mix of polished oak, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the low murmur of late arrivals. Eleanor's heart fluttered as she took her seat, observing the gallery. Madison Carter, slender and poised with her blonde hair styled into a neat bob, wore a tailored navy dress that contrasted with her pale complexion. Her high cheekbones were accentuated by a forced smile, and there was a cold calculation in her gray eyes that sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. Beside her, Ryan Carter, tall and broad-shouldered, with a square jaw shadowed by a hint of stubble, wore a navy suit slightly ill-fitted, as if he had outgrown it. His piercing blue eyes darted nervously, betraying the calm he tried to project. Benjamin Clark, in his customary charcoal suit and polished shoes, exuded a calm authority that seemed to command the attention of everyone in the room. His hazel eyes scanned the courtroom, assessing potential distractions and preparing Eleanor for every possible tactic Madison and Ryan might employ. Clark's demeanor reassured Eleanor, reinforcing her courage. The judge, a man in his early 50s with a stern face and graying temples, entered with deliberate steps. The room fell silent, the anticipation almost tangible. Eleanor straightened, gripping her hands to steady the tremor of excitement mixed with anxiety. She was about to confront the family who had betrayed her trust, armed with evidence and the law. Benjamin opened the proceedings, laying out the case with precision. He presented detailed bank statements, meticulously documented spreadsheets showing every withdrawal, every card swipe, and timestamps proving that the transactions occurred while Eleanor was at home, often in direct contradiction to Madison and Ryan's claims. Eleanor's pulse raced as she watched the images on the screen. Security footage from boutiques, cafes, and ATMs showing Madison and Ryan using her cards. Madison's deliberate movements, her smiling yet cold interactions with cashiers, and Ryan's calculated gestures were all captured in unforgiving clarity. "This evidence," Clark said, his voice calm but firm, "establishes a pattern of unauthorized financial activity. Each transaction was conducted without Mrs. Carter's consent, often at times when she was demonstrably elsewhere." Eleanor's hands shook slightly, but she felt a sense of empowerment. Each image, each entry in the report reinforced the truth she had uncovered. She was not paranoid. She had been systematically exploited. When called to testify, Eleanor rose with measured steps. The courtroom seemed to narrow around her, but her voice was steady, resonant with the years of dignity and resilience she had cultivated. She recounted every detail. The initial small loans that had escalated, the repeated unauthorized access to her accounts, and the discovery of additional fraudulent credit cards. Her gaze, unwavering, met Madison's and Ryan's, silently asserting that she would no longer be intimidated. "Did you, at any point, authorize Madison or Ryan to open credit accounts in your name?" the judge asked, his tone measured. "Never, Your Honor," Eleanor replied firmly. "I discovered these accounts only after consulting my attorney and reviewing my records." Madison's lips pressed into a thin line, her composure beginning to crack, while Ryan shifted in his seat, jaw tight, his hands fidgeting with the edge of the table. Their attorney, a sharp-featured man in his mid-30s with neatly combed dark hair and a navy tie, attempted to challenge Eleanor's statements. "Your Honor, some transactions were verbally authorized for family emergencies," he asserted, presenting supposed testimonies from neighbors claiming Eleanor sometimes appeared confused or forgetful. Benjamin Clark, anticipating this, countered with calm precision. "Your Honor, any alleged confusion has been conclusively disproven by Dr. Lillian Monroe, Mrs. Carter's longtime physician. Her comprehensive assessments over the past 2 years confirm Mrs. Carter's cognitive abilities are unimpaired. There is no medical basis for any claims of diminished capacity." Dr. Monroe, poised in a tailored gray suit, entered and provided clear testimony. Her auburn hair reflected the light as she spoke with confidence. "Mrs. Carter is fully capable of managing her finances and making rational decisions. There is no evidence of dementia or any condition affecting her judgment." The courtroom audience murmured softly, the weight of truth settling like a fog. Eleanor's green eyes glistened, a mix of relief and lingering anger. She realized that the betrayal was not just financial, it had been deeply personal, aimed at undermining her independence and dignity. Video evidence and financial records continued to play on the screen. Clark highlighted the systematic nature of the abuse. Late-night ATM withdrawals, duplicate cards, and purchases made in places Eleanor could not have been physically present. Vanessa Torres, the forensic accountant, stood by ready to explain the complex trails of fraud, her dark ponytail swishing slightly as she gestured to charts illustrating the flow of money through unauthorized accounts. Under cross-examination, Madison's story faltered repeatedly. She claimed verbal permission for some purchases, then admitted to impulsive spending, and finally acknowledged the creation of additional credit accounts, but tried to justify them as necessary for family needs. Ryan's testimony followed a similar pattern: contradictions, half-truths, and defensive posturing. The judge's stern gaze and pointed questions highlighted every inconsistency. Eleanor felt a strange calmness settle over her. The truth was irrefutable. The evidence was overwhelming. Benjamin's steady guidance, Dr. Monroe's expert testimony, and Vanessa's analytical precision had fortified her position. She had not only prepared meticulously, but had been vindicated by the structure and clarity of her case. After hours of tense deliberation and legal maneuvering, The judge rendered his decision. His voice carried both authority and finality. Mrs. Eleanor Carter has demonstrated clear evidence of systematic financial abuse. Madison and Ryan Carter's claims are without merit. Mrs. Carter shall retain full control over her finances. The defendants are ordered to reimburse her $30,000 in full, including legal costs, and shall have no direct contact with Mrs. Carter for a period of 1 year, except through legal counsel. A collective hush swept through the courtroom. Eleanor's chest tightened, a mixture of relief, vindication, and lingering sorrow. She had won, yet the emotional toll was evident. The family she once trusted had betrayed her profoundly. Benjamin Clark placed a comforting hand on Eleanor's arm. "It's over, Eleanor. You've reclaimed your life, your dignity, and your independence. Justice has prevailed." Eleanor nodded, swallowing a lump in her throat. Her eyes wandered momentarily to Madison and Ryan, whose expressions reflected shock, frustration, and the dawning realization of consequences they could no longer evade. Eleanor felt a pang of sadness for what had been lost. Yet beneath it all was a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. As they left the courtroom, rain had softened to a drizzle, and a pale sun began to emerge, casting light over the town. Eleanor inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp air fill her lungs. For the first time in months, she sensed the world opening up to her, unclouded by fear, betrayal, or uncertainty. The chapter closed with Eleanor stepping confidently onto the courthouse steps, her mind clear, her heart steady. The battle had been arduous, but she had emerged victorious, reclaiming her autonomy and the life she was determined to live on her own terms. The fight was over, the legal path secured, and Eleanor was ready to embrace the freedom she had fought so fiercely to protect. A crisp, autumn morning settled over Elmwood, the amber leaves drifting lazily across Eleanor Carter's garden. The air smelled faintly of damp earth, and the soft rustle of leaves mirrored the calm yet determined pulse in Eleanor's heart. At 72, she had faced the unimaginable, yet this morning she felt a flicker of hope she hadn't known in years. Her frame, slight but upright, her green eyes bright and resolute, reflected the inner strength cultivated through months of hardship. Whiskers, her 14-year-old gray tabby, padded silently beside her, brushing against her legs as if sensing the quiet victory she felt in reclaiming her life. Eleanor walked slowly along the stone path, touching the petals of the blooming asters and marigolds she had nurtured through the summer. Gardening had always been her solace, a tangible proof of growth and resilience. Each plant mirrored her own journey, once fragile, now thriving through care, patience, and resolve. Yet, beneath the calm, there remained a tender ache, a mourning for the family she had lost, the son and daughter-in-law who had betrayed her trust so profoundly. Benjamin Clark arrived punctually, as he always did, carrying a small bundle of books. His presence was calm, reassuring. At 62, he bore the marks of years practicing law, but his tall, lean frame carried a quiet vitality. Hazelnut eyes, thoughtful and attentive, scanned the garden with interest. Silver streaks through his dark brown hair suggested experience and wisdom, and his neatly trimmed beard framed a face that, though lined with the stresses of life, held a warmth that Eleanor found comforting. His personality was patient yet assertive. He had seen the worst of human nature through his legal work, but Eleanor's strength had stirred a genuine admiration in him. "Good morning, Eleanor," Benjamin said, his voice gentle, almost reverent amid the quiet of the garden. "I brought a few books I thought you might enjoy, some on horticulture, some novels. Perhaps a little light reading for a peaceful afternoon." Eleanor smiled, feeling the rare flutter of anticipation in her chest. She had learned to appreciate these moments. Quiet, unhurried, free from obligation or pressure. Thank you, Benjamin. That's very thoughtful. Come, sit with me by the roses. The sun is just right this morning. As they settled onto the garden bench, a comfortable rhythm developed between them. Conversations that had once centered on bank statements and court documents gradually shifted to more personal topics. Favorite authors, obscure botanical facts, childhood memories. Benjamin spoke of his 3 adult children, who lived in different cities, and of the widowhood that had marked his life 5 years prior. Eleanor shared tales of her late husband Robert, an accountant of impeccable integrity, whose quiet humor had once filled her home. It was in these conversations that Eleanor began to feel the fragile threads of trust and companionship weaving slowly between them. The legal battle had been exhausting, leaving scars both visible and invisible. Yet Benjamin's steady presence offered a sense of safety, a reminder that connection could exist without ulterior motives. She marveled at how trust, once broken by Madison and Ryan, could be cautiously rebuilt with patience and mutual respect. One afternoon, while Benjamin examined a particularly stubborn rosebush for signs of disease, Eleanor realized how much she had learned about boundaries. She spoke candidly. Benjamin, after everything with Madison and Ryan, I realize I can't allow anyone, no matter how close, to manipulate me. I have to protect myself, even from those I love. Benjamin nodded, adjusting his glasses, the sunlight glinting off the rims. You've shown remarkable resilience, Eleanor. Boundaries aren't walls, they're protections. They ensure that your kindness and generosity aren't exploited. You deserve that security, and you've earned it. The weeks that followed were a blend of gentle routines and subtle joys. Eleanor and Benjamin spent mornings tending the garden, afternoons reading or discussing philosophical questions, and evenings sipping tea while watching the sun set behind the rolling hills surrounding Elmwood. Each shared laugh, each quiet observation, deepened a bond founded not on dependency or financial ties, but on mutual respect and genuine affection. One particularly chilly November morning, Eleanor noticed a subtle change in her own demeanor. The fear and hypervigilance that had dominated her life for months were fading. She no longer flinched at every unexpected knock or scrutinized every phone call. The restraining order ensured safety from Madison and Ryan, but Eleanor's inner peace was the real triumph. She realized she could trust her own judgment, that she could act decisively to protect herself while still opening her heart to meaningful connection. Benjamin, perceptive as always, noticed the shift. You seem lighter today, he remarked, setting aside a book of botanical illustrations. It's as if the weight of the past months has finally begun to lift. Eleanor smiled, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease. It's not gone entirely, she admitted. But I've learned to carry it differently. I don't need to be afraid anymore. I can enjoy life without constantly looking over my shoulder. The garden became a sanctuary where past traumas were acknowledged, but did not dominate. Whiskers would weave between their legs, purring softly, and Benjamin occasionally paused to scratch the tabby behind the ears, creating moments of simple, grounding comfort. They shared meals at the wooden table on the patio, Eleanor cooking meals she had once prepared alone, Benjamin bringing dishes from his own recipes, merging tastes and traditions into shared experiences. Yet, Eleanor's journey toward rebuilding life was not only about nurturing joy, it was about reclaiming agency. She reopened her accounts under strict personal control, monitoring each transaction carefully. No longer would she rely on anyone else's word. She had learned that financial independence was intertwined with emotional autonomy. One day, Benjamin asked, "Have you considered traveling, Eleanor? A change of scenery might be refreshing." Something to celebrate your newfound freedom." Eleanor's eyes sparkled, the thought both exhilarating and comforting. "Perhaps," she replied. "There's a world I've been too cautious to explore, and now, with someone I trust beside me, it feels possible." The months moved on, each day building upon the last, a slow, deliberate reconstruction of Eleanor's life. The echoes of betrayal from Madison and Ryan persisted, but they no longer held power over her. She allowed herself to enjoy small pleasures: the rustling of leaves, the warmth of sunlight on her hands, the quiet laughter shared with Benjamin as they debated over garden layouts or book plots. Their relationship, tender and unassuming, flourished. There was affection in the gentle touches of hands while planting bulbs, in the shared silence of evenings reading side by side, and in the casual teasing over literary preferences. Eleanor had discovered that love in later life could be as profound and sustaining as any she had known, provided it was rooted in mutual respect and honesty. By the end of the season, Eleanor felt a profound sense of completion. She had survived deception, reclaimed her financial independence, and discovered a companionship that honored her dignity. The lessons were clear. Trust must be earned. Boundaries are vital, and life, even in its later chapters, could bring unexpected joy. Eleanor gazed over her thriving garden as dusk settled in, the pink and amber hues reflecting on her contented face. The air smelled of autumn leaves and damp earth, the scent grounding her in the present. Whiskers leapt gracefully onto the bench, nudging her gently. Eleanor reached out, stroking the soft fur, and felt a quiet, unshakable gratitude. Life had changed irrevocably. She had lost Madison and Ryan as they once were, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable: freedom, self-respect, and a meaningful partnership. The days ahead promised exploration, companionship, and the beauty of autonomy she had fought so hard to reclaim. Eleanor understood finally that rebuilding trust was not about erasing the past, but learning to protect oneself while embracing life anew. And in Benjamin, she had found a companion who walked beside her with patience, respect, and a shared joy for life's simple pleasures. Together, they had cultivated a life that, though born from struggle, was now filled with the serenity and affection Eleanor had yearned for all along. A soft spring morning blanketed Elmwood in pastel light, the air scented faintly with lilacs and freshly tilled soil. Birds trilled cheerfully from the branches, as if celebrating the calm that had finally returned to Eleanor Carter's life. At 72, she moved with a quiet confidence, her slender frame upright and composed, a glimmer of joy dancing in her emerald eyes. Her silver-streaked brown hair caught the morning light, and her fair skin glowed with health and peace. Whiskers, her aging gray tabby, purred warmly at her feet, rubbing against Eleanor's legs as if sharing in the renewal that filled the garden. Benjamin Clark arrived, his usual punctual self, carrying a small basket of pastries for their morning tea. At 62, he remained tall and lean, his hazel eyes sparkling with quiet amusement as he greeted Eleanor. His neatly trimmed beard and silver-streaked hair lent him a distinguished appearance, while his calm demeanor and patient voice carried reassurance that Eleanor had come to cherish deeply. The recent months had brought them close together, not through obligation, but through mutual respect, shared experiences, and the slow blooming of affection. "Good morning, Eleanor," Benjamin said warmly, setting the basket on the table outside their sunlit patio. "I thought we could enjoy these while planning the garden for summer. Perhaps some lavender along the west fence?" Eleanor smiled, feeling her heart flutter in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Lavender sounds perfect," she replied. "It will bring color, fragrance, and some bees to keep the garden lively. Just like life, we need a little buzzing around to keep things interesting. They settled into their routine, savoring pastries and tea, enjoying the quiet intimacy that had grown between them. Conversations drifted from horticulture to literature, shared memories of spouses they had lost, and small dreams for the future. Eleanor spoke of Robert, her late husband, recounting stories of his gentle humor and steadfast integrity, which had once been the backbone of her sense of security. Benjamin listened attentively, sharing similar stories of his late wife, their bond strengthened by mutual empathy for grief, loss, and renewal. The small town of Elmwood had begun to accept the change in Eleanor's life. Neighbors who had once expressed curiosity about her legal battles now watched her with quiet admiration, noticing the serene energy she carried. Eleanor relished this new chapter. Each smile exchanged, each casual greeting along the street, reinforced her sense of belonging and the normalcy she had fought so hard to reclaim. In late May, with the lilacs in full bloom, Eleanor and Benjamin were married in an intimate ceremony. The morning was bright, the sun filtering through young leaves that shivered in a gentle breeze. Only Whiskers, purring and stretching lazily on the patio railing, Eliza Martin, Eleanor's longtime friend and witness, and Benjamin's younger brother, Thomas Clark, attended. Thomas, a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a warm smile and sandy hair, had always been the supportive figure in Benjamin's life, loyal and unassuming, the kind of person who lent strength without overshadowing. Their presence made the day feel tender, intimate, and unpretentious. The officiating judge, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a calm authority, completed the ceremony with grace, emphasizing the love, respect, and partnership at the heart of their union. Eleanor felt an overwhelming sense of completion as she exchanged vows with Benjamin. This was not a union born of convenience or dependency, but of mutual appreciation, shared values, and a deep understanding of each other's lives. The vows were simple yet profound, speaking of respect, care, and the joy of building a shared life free from manipulation or deceit. As Benjamin slipped the ring onto her finger, Eleanor realized that happiness could arrive even after years of hardship, betrayal, and loss. After the ceremony, they celebrated quietly in the garden, the sun casting warm light over the flowers Eleanor had tended for decades. Benjamin unpacked a small, leather-bound journal, a gift he had brought for her. "I thought you could record our garden plans, our travels, our little adventures," he explained. Eleanor's eyes softened. The gesture symbolized a future built on partnership and mutual dreams. In the weeks following the wedding, Eleanor and Benjamin settled into a life that was both familiar and excitingly new. They traveled to nearby towns, visited historical gardens, and explored small coastal villages. Eleanor felt the thrill of rediscovery, appreciating the freedom she had earned through months of vigilance and resilience. She had regained control of her finances, overseen every transaction with care, and learned that protecting her wealth was intertwined with protecting her emotional well-being. Each day reinforced the lesson that self-respect, vigilance, and assertiveness could coexist with joy, affection, and love. At home, their routine became a comforting blend of shared responsibilities and personal pursuits. Eleanor managed the garden with Whiskers always nearby, while Benjamin tended to his ongoing legal work, often consulting cases of elder financial abuse that mirrored Eleanor's experience. Occasionally, he would pause to help Eleanor prune a particularly stubborn rosebush or to suggest a new arrangement for the flower beds. Their laughter mingled with the wind through the leaves, a soundtrack to a life reclaimed and renewed. One afternoon, as Eleanor planted a new row of daisies, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Madison and Ryan were no longer part of her life, a bitter chapter she had closed firmly. The legal battle had cost her much, but it had also taught invaluable lessons about boundaries, self-worth, and resilience. She recognized that material losses pale in comparison to the reclamation of personal agency and dignity. Benjamin's presence reinforced that joy could flourish again, untainted by past betrayals. The couple also found joy in nurturing their extended circle of friends and family. Benjamin's children occasionally visited, curious yet respectful of Eleanor's space. They were polite, attentive young adults who appreciated the harmony Eleanor and Benjamin cultivated. Eleanor found herself offering advice, sharing stories, and enjoying the lively yet respectful energy of young people who reminded her that life continued to evolve beyond her own experiences. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Eleanor sat with Benjamin on the patio bench, whiskers purring between them. "I never imagined my 70s could feel like this," Eleanor admitted softly, leaning against Benjamin's shoulder. "Full of hope, joy, and companionship. I've learned that even after loss, betrayal, and hardship, life can still surprise you with beauty." Benjamin smiled, brushing a strand of silver-streaked hair from her face. "You've earned this, Eleanor. Your courage, patience, and resilience have led you here. And together, we'll continue to grow, explore, and enjoy life without fear or constraint." Eleanor nodded, feeling the gentle warmth of contentment spread through her chest. She had regained freedom, secured her financial independence, and discovered the tender, nurturing love of someone who valued her for herself. The house, once shadowed by fear and manipulation, now echoed with laughter, conversation, and quiet moments of joy. Whiskers stretched luxuriously in a sunbeam, a silent witness to the peace Eleanor had fought to reclaim. As twilight descended, Eleanor felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had taught her that even when one loses everything of material value, the reclamation of dignity, autonomy, and meaningful connection can be infinitely richer. She realized that the true wealth of life was not in money or possessions, but in trust, love, and the freedom to live authentically. With Benjamin beside her, she faced each day with curiosity, courage, and a deep appreciation for the life they were building together. In the quiet of their garden, Eleanor whispered to herself, "This is what victory feels like: freedom, love, and the knowledge that I chose myself." Benjamin squeezed her hand gently, affirming that some victories are indeed sweeter when shared. Together, they watched the stars emerge, a silent promise of shared tomorrows filled with possibility, respect, and the joy of rediscovered life.